The hum in the Tactical Operations Center was a low, anxious thrum, a chorus of cooling fans and strained whispers. On the main holographic display, a topographical map of the Zagram Pass glowed in shades of ochre and blood red. The red icons were the problem. 6 of them, clustered in a narrow, rock-strewn valley known to the pilots as the Serpent's Jaw. Spectre Team. Pinned. Colonel Madsen stood before the display, a thick, bull-necked man whose face seemed permanently carved into a scowl of disapproval. His knuckles were white where he gripped the edge of the console. "Talk to me, Evans," he barked, his voice cutting through the noise. "What's Spectre lead status?" A young private, his face pale under the blue light of his monitor, tapped frantically at his keyboard. "Still pinned, sir. Sergeant Graves is," confirmed Kia. "They're taking effective fire from an elevated position, East Ridge. Can't identify the shooter. High angle, long range. Get me a drone feed. I want eyes on that ridge now," Madsen commanded. "Negative, sir. The wind shear in the jaw is over 60 knots. The Valkyrie drones can't maintain stable flight, and we lost the last mini-drone 30 minutes ago. The enemy is using the weather as cover." Madsen slammed a fist on the console, making the private flinch. "And air support?" "Same problem, sir. The Cobras can't get a clean attack vector with these crosswinds, and intel suggests a manpad's threat in the area. It's a death trap." The room felt heavy with the unspoken truth. Spectre Team was being dismantled one man at a time, and the command staff was nothing more than helpless spectators. In the corner of the room, away from the central command hub, Corporal Anya Sharma methodically wiped down a set of surgical clamps, her movements economical and serene. She wasn't supposed to be here. The forward aid station was her post. But she'd brought in a fresh supply of plasma and had stayed, ostensibly to restock, but in reality to watch. Her eyes, dark and deeply set, were fixed not on the blinking red icons, but on the contour lines of the map itself. She saw the wind patterns in the tightly packed lines, the thermal updrafts marked by the sun-scorched southern faces. She saw the logic of the mountain. "Shooters on the Gavin Spire," she said, her voice quiet but clear. It carried across the room in a sudden lull of comms chatter. Every head turned. Colonel Madsen's gaze fell upon her, a mixture of irritation and disbelief. He didn't recognize her at first, just a corporal in sterile fatigues, out of place among the operators and intelligence analysts. "Who said that? Who the hell are you?" Anya placed the final clamp on the sterilized tray with a soft click. "Corporal Sharma, sir." Medical, she stepped forward, her posture straight, her gaze unwavering. She pointed to a jagged peak on the holographic display, a feature that looked more like a broken tooth than a viable overwatch position. "The wind currents in the jaw create a stable air pocket just below the southern crest of that spire. It's a classic high-altitude hide. Clear line of sight into the basin, but shielded from the prevailing winds. You won't see him with thermal. The rock face radiates too much heat." Madsen stared at her, his lips tightening into a thin line of contempt. He knew every soldier on this forward operating base, and he knew Sharma's file. A medic. A damn good one, according to the reports, but with a note of insubordination from a tour in Kandahar. A maverick who'd disobeyed a direct order to save a wounded local national, nearly getting her whole team compromised. He saw her not as an asset, but as a discipline problem in a different uniform. "You're a medic, Corporal," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "Your job is to patch up soldiers, not to play strategist. How would you know anything about high-altitude ballistics?" "My grandfather taught me to read mountains, sir," she replied simply, no trace of defiance in her tone, only fact. The colonel let out a short, humorless laugh. "Your grandfather? Was he a geologist?" He waved a dismissive hand. "Get back to your aid station, Sharma. We have professionals working this problem." He turned his back on her, a clear and final rejection. "Evans, get me Spectre lead back on the line. I want a full sit rep on their remaining ammunition." Anya didn't argue. She didn't flush with anger or embarrassment. She simply gave a short, correct nod that no one saw and turned to leave. Her face was a mask of placid control, but behind her eyes, a cold, hard calculus was running. She had seen the casualty reports. Graves, their best sniper, was gone. The remaining members of Spectre were riflemen, formidable in a close fight but outmatched and outranged. Madsen's professionals were watching them die on a screen. As she walked toward the exit, Private Evans caught her eye. He'd heard the certainty in her voice, seen the dismissal from the colonel. He gave her a subtle, almost imperceptible nod, a flicker of solidarity from one low-ranking soldier to another. She acknowledged it and pushed through the door, the arid desert air hitting her like a physical blow. The colonel thought the problem was being worked. Anya knew it wasn't, and she knew what she had to do. She didn't head for the aid station. Her steps were measured and purposeful, leading her past the humming generators and the dusty motor pool, straight to the solid steel door of the armory. Master Sergeant Cole, a man whose gut preceded him into every room, looked up from his cluttered desk, his expression sour. "Sharma, here for more gauze? We're running low." "I'm here for a rifle, Master Sergeant," she said, her voice even. Cole's eyebrows shot up. He leaned back in his squeaking chair, a skeptical grin spreading across his face. "Is that so? Planning on performing surgery at a distance? Last I checked, your job was patching holes, not making them." Anya slid a laminated card across the desk. It was her range qualification card, updated 3 weeks prior. In the box marked Expert Marksman, the scores were perfect. Cole glanced at it, his amusement fading slightly. "This is for a standard M4. You're not drawing a designated marksman rifle on my watch without officer sign-off." "I don't want a DMR," Anya said. She looked past him, to the locked cage where the specialized weapons were kept. "I need the M2010. Sergeant Graves' rifle." Cole was silent for a long moment. He studied her face, searching for a sign of bravado, of foolishness. He found none. He saw only a chilling seriousness, a focus that seemed at odds with the medic insignia on her collar. "That's a specialist weapon, Corporal. No one touches it without direct orders from the colonel. And from what I hear, you're not exactly on his Christmas card list. Spectre team has 4, maybe 5 minutes of effective engagement left before their position is completely overrun," Anya stated, not as a plea, but as a tactical assessment. "The colonel's plan will get them killed. I have a chance to prevent that." Her certainty was unsettling. It wasn't arrogance. It was the calm confidence of someone who had already done the math and knew the answer. Cole grunted, a sound of profound conflict ion. He was a man who lived by the book, but he had also seen enough good men die because the book was wrong. He looked at her qualification card again, then at the comms unit crackling with frantic, desperate chatter from the TOC. He made a decision. "You have 2 minutes," he said, pushing himself to his feet and grabbing a key ring. "If anyone asks, you broke in here and threatened me with a used syringe." "Got it. Understood, Master Sergeant," she said. He unlocked the cage and pulled the heavy rifle from its rack. It was a formidable piece of equipment, but Anya's attention went straight to the optics. She worked quickly, her hands sure and practiced. She used a small, specialized tool from a pouch on her belt to remove the standard-issue scope mount. From the same pouch, she produced a piece of blued steel, a custom-machined mount, its surface worn smooth with age and scarred with the faint inscriptions of windage adjustments from 100 different firing lines. It was her grandfather's design, engineered to withstand the minute vibrations and temperature shifts of high-altitude environments. She fitted it to the rifle's Picatinny rail, the metal seating with a satisfying, perfect click. It was a piece of her past, a tangible link to the man who had taught her that a rifle was an instrument of mathematics, not rage. She gathered the rest of the kit: a Kestrel wind meter, a laser rangefinder, and a worn leather-bound databook filled with handwritten ballistic charts. She slung the rifle over her shoulder, the weight familiar and comforting. As she turned to leave, Cole stopped her. "Sharma, you didn't get this from me." "I know," she said. She paused at the door. "Thank you." Cole just grunted again and sat back down, already preparing his official denial. Anya stepped out into the blinding sun, her shadow long and sharp on the compacted earth. In the TOC, Private Evans watched her cross the compound on a secondary security feed. On instinct, he opened a discreet, encrypted audio channel and patched it to her comm unit's frequency. He didn't know what she was planning, but he knew the colonel was wrong, and he had a feeling Corporal Sharma was about to prove it. The route Anya chose was not a path. It was a suggestion of one, a line of logic imposed upon the hostile landscape. She bypassed the waiting Humvees, their engines idling uselessly. A vehicle would be a noisy, obvious target, a clumsy intrusion in a place that demanded subtlety. She moved on foot, her boots making soft, rhythmic crunches on the gravelly soil of the wadi that led out from the FOB. The sun was a hammer, the heat radiating up from the ground in shimmering waves, but her pace was steady, her breathing controlled. She moved with an unnatural grace, less like a soldier burdened with gear, and more like a creature native to this desolate land. She didn't climb the hills. She flowed over them, using the natural contours, the shallow depressions and rocky outcrops, as a shield. Her eyes were constantly scanning not just for threats, but for information. The way a dust devil spun in the distance told her about the unpredictable ground-level winds. The slight lean of the thorny scrub bushes indicated the prevailing direction of the stronger gusts at higher elevations. Her grandfather had taught her this language, the silent vocabulary of the wild. He'd been a legendary scout sniper, a ghost who could live off the land for weeks, but more than that, he was a man who understood that the environment was not an obstacle, but a tool for those who knew how to listen to it. Her target was the ridge opposite the Gavin Spire, a treacherous knife edge of shattered shale and granite that the mission planners had dismissed as inaccessible and tactically useless. It offered no cover and was fully exposed to the brutal crosswinds. But Anya saw what they didn't. She saw the network of tiny crevices and fissures that would allow her to ascend unseen. She saw the one small, stable ledge, no bigger than a coffin, that would be sheltered from the main force of the wind by the peak's primary rock face. It was a terrible position for anyone else. For her, it was perfect. The climb was grueling. The shale crumbled under her boots, and the wind tore at her, a physical force trying to rip her from the mountain. Each handhold had to be tested, each footstep placed with absolute certainty. Sweat stung her eyes, and her muscles burned with the strain, but her focus never wavered. Her mind was a quiet space of calculation and observation. She wasn't just climbing, she was gathering data. The temperature dropped with every 100 feet of elevation. The air thinned. The wind became a complex symphony of interacting currents, some flowing around the spire, others being funneled down the ravines. She logged it all, building a three-dimensional model of the battle space in her mind. Finally, she pulled herself over the last ledge and crawled into her chosen spot. It was exactly as she had predicted. A small nook shielded from the roaring wind, offering a commanding view of the Gavin Spire and the valley below. Through her binoculars, she could see Spectre Team's position, marked by the desperate flashes of muzzle fire. She could see the puffs of dust where the enemy snipers' rounds were impacting, pinning them down like insects to a board. She unslung the M2010. Her movements were unhurried, a model of efficiency. She laid out a small canvas mat to keep the dust from her equipment. She attached the rifle to its bipod, seating the legs firmly into the rock. She positioned her data book, opening it to a page marked with atmospheric tables. She took out the Kestrel wind meter and held it up, letting it acclimate, its tiny impeller spinning furiously. The numbers that flashed on its screen would have seemed like chaos to anyone else. To Anya, they were the variables in a complex but solvable equation. She was home. Back in the TOC, chaos reigned. Spectre 4 is hit. I repeat, 4 is down. The voice of Spectre Lead was strained, laced with fury and exhaustion. On the tactical map, another red icon flickered and went dark gray. Colonel Madsen's face was ashen. His options had evaporated. A full-scale assault would be suicide. A retreat under this kind of accurate long-range fire would be just as costly. He was trapped, forced to listen as his men were executed from a mile away. He was about to give the order to pull back, to sacrifice the rear guard to save the rest, when Private Evans shot up from his chair. "Sir, I have an incoming comms transmission on a discreet channel." "From who? Damn it?" Matson roared. "Is it Spectre?" "Negative, sir. The identifier is Corporal Sharma." Matson's head snapped around, his eyes blazing with fury. "What? That medic? How did she get a secure channel? I ordered her to the aid station. Get her off the net, now." "That is a restricted frequency." Before Evans could comply, Anya's voice came through the main speakers, calm and steady, a pool of stillness in the swirling panic of the TOC. "Colonel, this is Sharma. Do not have Spectre team move. I have positive identification on the enemy position." A dead silence fell over the room. The operators and analysts stared at the speakers as if they had just sprouted wings. Madsen looked utterly poleaxed. "Target is a two-man team, spotter and shooter." Anya's voice continued, devoid of any emotion except for a chilling professionalism. "Located on the Gavin Spire, coordinates 049er by 327, just below the main crest. They are dug into a natural rock formation. Range is 3,000 yards. A wave of disbelief rippled through the TOC. 3,000 yards. Over 2,700 meters. Nearly a mile and 3/4. It was a shot that bordered on the impossible, a feat of marksmanship that existed more in legend than in practice. Sergeant Graves, their best sniper, had a confirmed kill at 1,800 meters, and it was considered the stuff of legend on the FOB. This was nearly double that. "That's a negative, Corporal." Matson finally spat into his microphone, recovering his voice. "That is an impossible shot. The wind shear alone makes it. The wind at my position is a steady 25 knots, gusting to 30 from 290 degrees. Anya interrupted, her voice still perfectly level. "The crosswind through the center of the valley is variable, but I have a solution. Temperature at target is approximately 82 degrees Fahrenheit. Barometric pressure is 29.92 and falling. Coriolis effect is a factor." She was rattling off data that only a master marksman would even consider. Madsen was speechless. "Tell Spectre team to be ready to move on my signal," she said. It wasn't a request. It was a statement of intent. Through her scope, the world was a circle of magnified reality. The heat shimmer rising from the valley floor made the air dance, distorting the image. But Anya's eyes, trained for years by her grandfather, saw through it. She saw the subtle break in the rock formation, the dark slit that was the enemy sniper's hide. She saw the glint of the sun off the spotter's lens. She lay prone, the rifle stock pressed firmly into the pocket of her shoulder. Her left hand gently supported the butt of the rifle, her right curled around the grip. Her breathing slowed, each inhalation and exhalation a long, controlled process. In hold out, she consulted the data on her Kestrel and in her logbook one last time. The calculations scrolled through her mind: bullet drop, spin drift, aerodynamic jump, the planet's rotation. At this range, the bullet would be in the air for nearly 5 seconds. It would drop over 100 feet. The wind would push it dozens of feet to the side. She had to account for everything. She adjusted the elevation turret on her scope. Click, click, click. The sound was precise, mechanical. Then the windage. Click, click, click. She held her breath, the crosshairs settling on a point far above and to the left of the target. A patch of empty air where the bullet would be in 3 seconds' time. The world narrowed to that single point. The chaos of the TOC, the Colonel's anger, the fate of Spectre team. It all faded away. There was only the rifle, the mountain, and the math. She exhaled slowly, and in the perfect stillness between heartbeats, she squeezed the trigger. The rifle bucked against her shoulder, a controlled, violent push. The muzzle blast kicked up a cloud of dust that was instantly torn away by the wind. She immediately reacquired the target through the scope, watching the vapor trail of the bullet, a faint, ghostly corkscrew in the air. 1 second. 2. 3. The The trail seemed to crawl across the vast expanse. In the TOC, everyone held their breath, their eyes glued to the drone feed that Evans had finally managed to get stabilized, pointing it roughly at the spire. Then, a tiny puff of rock dust erupted from the Gavin spire, exactly where the sniper's nest was hidden. A moment later, Spectre Lead's voice, raw with shock, crackled over the radio. Target down. Splash. I repeat, splash. Threat is neutralized. Holy Mother of God. Where did that shot come from? The enemy's response was immediate and brutal. They had been arrogant, relying on the skill of a single superlative marksman. Now that asset was gone, and they reacted with blind fury. A deep, percussive thump echoed up the valley, followed seconds later by the scream of an incoming mortar round. It exploded 50 yards from Spectre's position, showering them with rock and shrapnel. Mortar! Spectre Lead yelled over the comms. They've got a mortar team dug in down in the valley floor. We're bracketed. The tactical situation had shifted in a heartbeat. They were no longer pinned by a sniper. They were being targeted for annihilation by indirect fire. Colonel Madsen, his face a mask of grim realization, grabbed his microphone. The fury and skepticism were gone, replaced by a desperate, raw urgency. He was no longer speaking to a disobedient medic. He was speaking to his only hope. Echo, this is Madsen, he said, using the call sign he had just decided to give her. A name that felt right, as if pulled from the mountain air itself. I need eyes on that mortar. Now, pinpoint their location. His use of the new call sign was a tacit admission of his error, a battlefield promotion born of necessity. Anya, however, took no notice of it. She was already working. The initial shot had been a question of pure ballistics, of mastering distance and environment. This was a different problem. This was a hunt. She scanned the valley floor, her scope moving in a slow, methodical grid pattern. The mortar team would be smart. They would be dug in, camouflaged, using the natural terrain for cover. She looked for the tells her grandfather had taught her. Unnatural shadows, freshly disturbed earth, the subtle heat signature from the mortar tube after the first firing. There in the ravine at the base of the western slope, she reported, her voice as calm as if she were ordering supplies. Behind that large granite outcropping. I can see the blast signature on the rocks, but I don't have a direct line of sight on the tube itself. The rock formation is blocking the shot. Another mortar round landed, this time closer, kicking up a plume of dirt that rained down on Spectre's foxholes. Echo, I need a solution. Madsen's voice was tight with strain. Can you suppress them? Keep their heads down. Anya didn't answer immediately. She was studying the geometry of the battlefield. The mortar was in a deep pit, shielded by a massive, sheer wall of granite. A direct shot was physically impossible from her angle. Any other sniper would have reported the position and waited for air support or an artillery strike, neither of which was available. But Anya's mind didn't work that way. She didn't see impossibilities. She saw complex angles. She zoomed in on the rock face directly above the mortar pit. It was a slab of ancient, weathered granite, angled at roughly 45 degrees. She began to run a new set of calculations, this time factoring in deflection angles, bullet deformation, and the kinetic energy transfer upon impact with a solid surface. It was a theory she and her grandfather had discussed but never attempted. A ricochet shot, at over 1,000 yards. Colonel, she said, her voice betraying the first hint of intense concentration. I have a potential solution. It is low probability. I don't care about probability right now, Echo. I care about results. What's the plan? I'm going to use the rock face above their position as a backboard, she explained. If I can calculate the angle of incidence correctly, I can deflect the round down into the mortar pit. In the TOC, a stunned silence fell once again. Private Evans stared at his screen, his mouth slightly agape. A ricochet shot? It was something out of a movie, a trick shot that defied the laws of physics and common sense. Colonel Madsen closed his eyes for a second, processing the sheer audacity of the proposal. He had no other options. Spectre team was being systematically destroyed. "Do it," he said, his voice a low growl of command. "Execute." Anya acknowledged the order with a simple Roger. She adjusted her position, shifting her weight slightly to get the perfect angle. This shot was less about wind and atmosphere and more about pure, unadulterated geometry. She adjusted her scope, aiming not at the enemy, but at a specific spot on the flat rock face, a point she had calculated would provide the perfect deflection. The pressure was immense. A slight miscalculation in the angle, a gust of wind she hadn't accounted for, a flaw in the rock itself. Any of it would send the bullet flying harmlessly into the mountain. She controlled her breathing, slowing her heart rate until she could feel the pulse in her fingertips. The world once again narrowed to the crosshairs in her scope. This time, they rested on a patch of gray, sun-bleached granite. She squeezed the trigger. The report of the rifle echoed across the valley. In the TOC, they watched the drone feed, which was now focused on the rock formation hiding the mortar. For a heart-stopping second, nothing happened. Then, a bright spark flashed on the angled rock face, like a camera flash. A fraction of a second later, the ground inside the mortar pit erupted in a violent explosion of dust and fire. A huge, billowing cloud of black smoke rose into the air, a clear sign of a catastrophic secondary detonation. The mortar rounds had been hit. The mortar team was gone. In the TOC, no one spoke. No one moved. They simply stared at the screen, at the pillar of smoke rising in the quiet valley. Colonel Madsen slowly lowered his microphone, his hand trembling slightly. He had just witnessed the impossible twice. With the two primary threats eliminated, the sniper and the mortar, the balance of power in the Serpent's Jaw had fundamentally shifted. But Spectre team was not out of danger. The enemy, now leaderless and in disarray, still had numbers. Scattered infantry elements, armed with assault rifles and at least one machine gun, began to move, attempting to flank Spectre's exposed position and cut off their retreat. Anya transitioned seamlessly from a sniper engaged in surgical strikes to a guardian angel providing overwatch. Her rifle, which had just performed miracles of long-range ballistics, became an instrument of relentless, methodical suppression. Her voice came over the comms, a calm, steady metronome in the chaos of the firefight. "Spectre lead, this is Echo. You have a two-man team moving through the wash on your 9 o'clock. Behind the red boulder. Engaging now." A single shot cracked across the valley. On the ground, Spectre lead saw two figures who had been creeping toward their flank simply drop and lie still. "Targets down, Echo." "Good hit." "Acknowledged," Anya replied. "Be advised, I have movement on the high ground to your front. Looks like a machine gun team setting up. Range is 700 yards. Stand by." The members of Spectre team, who moments before had been preparing to die, now fought with renewed ferocity. They had an eye in the sky, a ghost on the mountain guiding their every move. Anya's calls were precise, giving them the crucial seconds of warning they needed to shift their fields of fire and meet each new threat. "Spectre 3, you have a single hostile crawling toward you, low in the scree. 150 yards. 1 o'clock. A burst of automatic fire from Spectre 3 confirmed the kill. The machine gun opened up, its heavy chatter echoing off the canyon walls, kicking up dirt and rock chips all around Spectre's position. The bullets whizzed over their heads, forcing them to keep low. "Echo, we're pinned by that machine gun," Spectre lead yelled. "We can't move." "I have the target," Anya's voice replied, still unervingly calm. "He's behind a fortified rock pile. I only have a partial view of his helmet. It's a difficult shot. Spectre lead, on my mark, I need you to suppress his position. Make him flinch." "Roger that, Echo. On your mark." Anya took a deep breath. The target was mostly obscured, a sliver of darkness behind a jumble of rocks. She would have to thread the needle. "Mark." Spectre team opened up with everything they had, a volley of rifle fire that hammered the machine gun nest, forcing the gunner to duck. In that split second of distraction, as his head moved, Anya fired. The shot was perfect. The heavy machine gun fell silent. Target eliminated, she reported. The path to the extraction point is clear to your southwest. Move now. I will cover your withdrawal. For the next 10 minutes, Anya was a specter of death on the mountain. Any enemy soldier who was brave or foolish enough to show himself was met with a single lethal shot from the M2010. She guided Spectre team back, foot by foot, rock by rock, calling out safe routes and neutralizing threats before they could even form. She was a one-woman army, holding back the enemy with nothing but a rifle and an almost supernatural understanding of the battlefield. She remained in her perch, motionless, long after Spectre team had scrambled aboard the inbound Black Hawk. She watched the helicopter lift off, its rotors beating against the turbulent air, until it was a disappearing speck against the cobalt blue sky. Only then, when she was certain they were safe, did she allow herself to relax. She carefully packed her equipment, wiped down the rifle, and policed her position, leaving no trace that she had ever been there. The descent from the ridge was slow and deliberate, the adrenaline fading, replaced by a deep, bone-weary exhaustion. When Anya Sharma walked back into the TOC, the familiar hum of machinery was gone. The room was utterly silent. Every person in the room, analysts, officers, comms techs, was on their feet, their eyes fixed on her. She was covered in dust, her face streaked with sweat and grime, the heavy sniper rifle slung over her shoulder. She looked not like a medic, but like a warrior returning from some ancient, heroic battle. Colonel Madsen stood in the center of the room, a data slate in his hand. He had spent the last hour reading her complete, unredacted service record. He'd read about the insubordination charge, but he also read the after-action report that the official summary had omitted. The local national she had saved against orders had later provided intelligence that dismantled a major IED network, saving the lives of dozens of coalition soldiers. He read the glowing reviews from her instructors at every marksmanship school she had ever attended. And he read the small, almost overlooked biographical note in her file. He walked toward her, his heavy boots echoing on the concrete floor. He stopped directly in front of her, his gaze intense. The entire room held its breath. "Your grandfather was Captain Aaron Sharma," Madsen said. It was not a question. They called him Ghost, 1st Special Forces Group. He was a legend in the Vietnam era. Anya met his gaze, her expression unreadable. She gave a single, slow nod. "Yes, sir." "He taught you," Madsen stated, his eyes flicking down to the worn, custom scope mount on the rifle she carried. He reached out, his calloused fingers hesitating for a moment before gently touching the scarred steel. It felt like he was touching a holy relic. Anya nodded again. "He taught me to see the math, sir. To respect the mountain." Madsen stood there for a long moment, the weight of his earlier dismissal, his condescending words pressing down on him. He had almost cost 6 men their lives because of his own arrogance and prejudice. He had looked at a uniform and an insignia and seen only what he expected to see. He had failed to see the warrior standing right in front of him. He turned to Private Evans, his voice now clear and resolute, stripped of all its earlier bluster. "Evans, update Corporal Sharma's duty status, effective immediately. She is permanently reassigned from medical. Her official operational call sign is Echo. She is attached to my command staff." He turned back to Anya. "You report directly to me now." Before Anya could respond, the door to the TOC burst open and Spectre Lead strode in, his face still covered in the grime of battle. He walked straight past the colonel, his eyes locked on Anya. He stopped in front of her, and for a moment the two soldiers just looked at each other. Then, the hardened ranger, a man who had seen the worst of combat, extended his hand. Anya took it. His grip was firm, conveying a depth of gratitude that words could never express. "We owe you our lives," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "All of us." Anya simply nodded, her hand still in his. There was nothing else to say. The actions on the mountain had spoken for her. Later, as the sun began its slow descent, painting the sky in fiery shades of orange and purple, Anya found herself at the deserted firing range at the edge of the FOB. The oppressive heat of the day was finally breaking, replaced by a cool evening breeze that whispered through the empty stalls. The only sounds were the distant hum of the base generators and the rhythmic, metallic clicks as she meticulously cleaned the M2010 rifle. She worked with a quiet reverence, stripping the weapon down to its basic components. The smell of gun oil and solvent filled the air, a scent she found more comforting than any perfume. This was her sanctuary, a place of order and precision. She cleaned the bolt, wiped down the barrel, and carefully polished the lens of the powerful scope. For her, this was not a celebration of violence, but a ritual of respect for the tool that had allowed her to impose order on chaos. It was about competence. It was about honoring the lessons her grandfather had painstakingly taught her on the windy peaks of the Cascade Mountains back home. It was about doing the job that needed to be done, without fanfare or expectation of reward. She heard the crunch of boots on the gravel behind her but didn't look up. She knew who it was. Colonel Madsen came to a stop beside her workbench, standing in silence for a long moment, watching her sure, practiced hands at work. The setting sun cast their long shadows across the range. Finally, he spoke, his voice quiet, stripped of command. The official after-action report will state that an unidentified friendly asset provided sniper support. It will be classified. There will be no medals, no public commendation. It's cleaner that way. I understand, sir, Anya said without looking up from her work, her voice neutral. She hadn't expected any. But what happened today? Madsen continued. It won't be forgotten by the people who matter. He placed a small, newly made patch on the bench next to her cleaning kit. It was circular, embroidered with a simple but powerful image. A faint, ghostly figure, and trailing just behind it, a series of fading sonic rings, an echo. Anya paused her work and picked it up. She ran her thumb over the raised stitching. Welcome back, Echo, Madsen said softly. He gave her a single, respectful nod, turned and walked away, leaving her alone with the rifle and the setting sun. Anya finished cleaning the last component, reassembling the rifle with the fluid efficiency of a master craftsman. The bolt slid home with a solid, satisfying thud. She stood for a long time, the rifle resting on the bench, the new patch in her hand. The wind picked up, swirling the dust of the range around her feet. The mission was over. The noise had faded. In the quiet dignity of the twilight, she was no longer just a medic, no longer just Corporal Sharma. She was Echo, and she was exactly where she was supposed to be.